Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand the sunk cost fallacy, where sometimes people think, oh, well, we've invested so much time in doing this way, so we got to keep doing it. It's like, no, that time and energy's been spent. So you need to move on as quickly as possible.
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast with Stephen Leese and Shaun. This podcast is a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses. You can live with the status quo, you can challenge the status quo, or you can do what we do at Goodr and status the quo challenge.
All right, so what's up, Stephen?
What's up, Shaun?
Well, we're in a different room than we've ever been in with a different setup. What gives?
Well, we never did video podcasts until this November.
Yeah.
And when we first saw them, I realized, oh, we need to improve these. And it was nobody's fault. It was really just our inexperience. The room we chose was really cool, but it put us too close together. I wore sunglasses for the open read and was really disconnecting to the audience. And I just we realized that as I was watching this back, I'm like, oh, our original podcast format was amazing for audio only. But now that we offer a visual along with it, we need to change things up. So at Goodr, we change things on the fly. So here we are.
Yeah, totally. Well, like you said, we do change a lot of things really quickly. Everything's constantly shifting. I would say the only constant really is change.
Yep.
Maybe talk about some of the things that change a lot versus the things that don't.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand the sunk cost fallacy, where sometimes people think, oh, well, we've invested so much time in doing this way, so we got to keep doing it. It's like, no, that time and energy's been spent. So you need to move on as quickly as possible. There are a bunch of things like TWC, our weekly staff meeting. We have a 10-minute meeting afterwards. We call it O.W.L.S, which stands for opportunity, weaknesses, losses, and Snext actions. This doesn't matter. It's a stupid acronym. Right. It doesn't matter. But every time we have a staff meeting, everybody who's involved gives a quick feedback loop about it. Oh, we like this, we didn't like that. So that we are changing every week. Slight tweaks, right? Really, really minor tweaks. AMP, our quarterly review system. Every quarter we do it, we make slight tweaks. It used to be we made bigger ones because it was new. And now, right, they're really, really minor. And so those are things that we do regularly. We get better at it. I mean, imagine if you're in a play, you get notes after every performance, right? And you're not becoming a new character. You're realizing, oh, I need to tweak that line. Mm-hmm. Or if you're a dancer, oh, hey, you're not hitting that move in that song. And so a lot of our things, we're really good at that. And then sometimes we will just scrap stuff if it is not good. Personally, I do it for talks. We have cut the mold. We have went to tooling and built the mold on 3 different models, got them back and been like, this is not right, and killed it. And so we have the ability here to change things quickly, and we often do. Yeah,
for sure. So to that end, you built the sort of NASA framework, we call it. I know we've covered that in depth in other episodes, but can you give just a quick high level for that?
Yeah, so NASA, if any of our listeners hears us talk about going to the moon or all the space analogies, that came from a couple years ago of Goodr's at a rapid growth. We basically grow 50% close year over year. And so we're going to the moon. Goodr's a rocket ship and we're heading towards the moon. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that we were really struggling with, and realized this earlier this year, was we were not good at using insights. We have a ton of data over the past 7 years. So we need to be better using our insights. We need to be better at agility. So the best plans always have to be changed. So making sure that we are excited to make change. We are not annoyed to make change. We need to make sure things scale as we keep growing. Some of the biggest issues are we're not asking ourselves, can we scale? What is the scale model? And then the 4th thing that we really need to focus on here is accountability. So, right. So that acronym is NASA. Insights, drop the I because we're Goodr and that's just what we do. Insights, agility, scalability, accountability, and rolled that out. And it's really something we look at all the time. And what's really important is they're kind of all equally weighted. It's easier to jump to one or the other. But, today we're going to talk about agility because I think a lot of times brands fail because they're unwilling to change quickly. They just get stuck in cement.
Yeah, for sure. And that, I think, what we call owls, most people call like a postmortem, right?
Yeah, like a SWAT, a postmortem SWAT.
Yeah, totally. I always thought that was weird because postmortem means it's dead.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You killed it. That's not good. But in the end, for NASA, we're essentially saying, okay, what were those things we learned? How can we use those now to move this thing forward, starting from what we've learned in the past?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes there's hard data, right? When we're planning what colors to buy, we can look at hard data and trace it back. And so that's easy. And I think that's a lot of times what people think about with insights, but there's a lot of just visual insights, right? I watched the episode and I thought to myself, I'm disconnected from the audience because I'm wearing sunglasses.
Right.
Okay. I don't need any data. This feels wrong to me.
Yeah.
And so that is like a really important thing, that there's so many insights that we can gain just from personal experience. We don't need to mine data. Sometimes you do. I mean, when you're doing financials and planning for, SKUs, you should, but a lot of times you can just go on feeling.
Yeah. There's charts, graphs, and then there's like, it just seems off.
Yeah, it seems off, right? If you've ever, a lot of our brand, our culture is built on insights. It's built on, I worked for a company that didn't have that. That sucked. They didn't do quarterly reviews. That sucked. So we're going to do them.
Yeah.
Or I work for a company that you spent 2 hours a day cleaning out your email. That sucked. We're going to do Slack.
Right.
Yeah. We don't need to look at, Excel sheets to determine those insights.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Nice. So we're both poker players.
Yeah.
In poker, they say, don't throw in good money after bad, right?
For sure.
No one to fold them or whatever. So like what would be some gooder version of that concept applied to what we're doing here?
Yeah. I think that I'll go down the product hole a little bit more. We release one model-ish a year, sometimes two. And when you create a new model in sunglasses, you basically start with an idea, then you create a concept, and then we do some 3D prints. And 3D prints are good, but they're not great. And eventually we get to a place where we're like, yep, this is good to go. And we hand it over to our factory and they create a mold, right? They create an actual mold that gets, plastic gets injected into.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. And usually by the time you go to the mold, you should be at the final product. But 3 times we have gotten it back and it was not good. The first one was basically what turned out being the PHG. We were trying to do the PHG in 2019. The Rapti that we released this year, the first version of that, it just, the design language was off. I don't want to go too nerdy on this, but the design feel of the front did not match the arms. And so we had to kill it and push the launch 6 months.
Yeah.
And that there was a lot of time, a lot of energy spent in there, right? So it would be easy to say, well, we did that, so we should launch it. It's like, no. So back to like, don't throw good money after bad. It's like, yeah. But we still have to sell this product and take photographs and live with it.
Yeah.
That is an insane amount of effort. That is an insane amount of effort to not pull the plug on it immediately and move past it.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times we, as people, the collective, we're okay with good enough, and with something like product, it's got to be right because you're going to live with it for a long time because it's a physical thing. So yeah, that's one story, and that's just. That mentality kind of bleeds through everything. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably comforting to hear for people, right? Like, oh, this company actually cares about the stuff they create. They're not going to be like, all right, close enough, ship it,
Yeah.
It's like, that's not good enough. Send it back.
I mean, when's the last time you spent a ton of work on a project and then just threw it in the trash?
I feel like I've been doing that on repeat with my recent AMP update. I'm like, it's got to be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, at some point it's going to have to be done.
Yeah. I mean, right. And that is the balance of done is better than perfect. Really important. And also, we take pride in our work and we're professionals. And so done is better than perfect does not mean sloppy, right? Does not mean garbage. It means, hey, fight the resistance, right? Fight Pressfield, right? Like Stephen Pressfield, fight that resistance to be perfect, to procrastinate. So fight against procrastination to get something out, but know when you need to take pride in your work and when you don't.
Yeah.
You always need pride in your work. Learn to understand when nothing's perfect, when is good enough.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That was one thing where we always say done is better than perfect, but the product team is like, perfect is done.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
That's fair.
Well played, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
If we were to look at big projects we've canceled, so you're talking about products, right? Yeah. There's also been a number of projects within the brand that got pretty far along, and then we're like, it doesn't make sense to keep going down this path. Is there anything that comes to mind for you there?
I'm sure you have some. I will. A couple things. One thing we always say here is what was good for goodr in 2016 is different than 17 and 18 and 20 and 21 and 23. And so there's a lot of things here we've stopped doing. And I think that from internally, we even think to ourselves, oh, well, we've always done it that way. And then we find ourselves ending that. So, I mean, a couple things that spring to mind. Until next year, we're moving to the trimester system.
Yeah.
So we've been on the quarter system. So once a quarter, we do AMP, goodr stock, all of our important meetings. We realized we got good enough at them that we can move from a quarter system to a trimesterly system.
Yeah.
So we already made the plans to do that. How we've launched product, we have redone that process in infinite amount of times. Actually, I don't even quite know how many. We used to go, I'm trying to think of, do you have any off the top of your head?
Co-brands for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have a custom program here called co-brands. And so for our listeners, back in 2000, I think maybe the first one was in late 2016 or late 2017. It's getting fuzzy in my brain, but we were working with, at that time we got reached out to by Saucony and by Strava and asked like, oh, could we put our logos on your glasses? I'm like, yeah, sure. And we had a 300 unit minimum and we did it for them. And at that time, selling 300 units at once was, like 20% of our month.
Yeah.
Right. It was a huge, huge deal and it made a lot of sense. And so we started a co-brand program and we ran that from basically 2017 until January this year. In January this year, looked at it, a bunch of people gave me feedback on it and realized this is not profitable anymore. It's fucking up our logistics. It's actually not great margin. We are seeing our logo on stuff that we don't really like. We're becoming more of a comp. And so we killed it. And we killed it and took 7 digits worth of projected revenue off the books.
Yeah. And
that hurt. But what would hurt more is to keep doing something that does not work, right? That is the throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing that we ended, and it was the right move.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to appear inconsistent, but because things change constantly, it helps to be able to just go, we just changed our minds on this. Or like, I recognize we were fully invested in this direction, but actually we're going to go over here. So how do you manage those kinds of conversations? Just knowing like a lot of it kind of feels like stoppy starty, but it's all in one cohesive direction.
Yeah. How do you make sure people don't have shiny new syndrome, SOS, shiny object syndrome?
Yeah.
Right. Because that is a real thing. Also, that's how people procrastinate. Man, I think that it really depends. So on things we do like clockwork, we are so consistent on our staff meetings and our review system and these big milestones we have. And what's nice about that, it actually frees us to say, hey, let's try this time. And if it doesn't work, we'll fix it next time.
Yeah.
So that's a freeing feeling because we always know. Recently, I don't want to go too into it. We have this thing at goodr called speed dating. And we got too big for everybody in the company to do it in the way we used to do it. And so Hansi came to me and asked, hey, what do you love about speed dating? And so a little more context. During goodr, there used to be a moment. It used to be everybody would have 3 minutes at the company. They'd have a walk-up song. They go to the front of the conference room and they would talk about their favorite projects they worked on this past quarter. And then there was some fun stuff. And then we grew to 50 people and we got it to like 90 seconds. And then 80 people and we're at 1 minute. And then we're out 120 people and we can't do it the same way we used to. It was just too much time. And I told Hansi, it's like, hey, all I really care about is that somebody has like a moment for themselves. And if you live into that, everything else can change. And I said to her, I go, and if you try something and it doesn't work, we'll just fix it next quarter.
Yeah.
That's why it's really important to be able to do stuff on repeat because then you can chase it. So but back to your question at hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is somebody changing something because it's not good for the customer? And the customer could be the employees at goodr. It could be our customer, could be our global distributors. Is somebody changing something because because it's not good to the customer or because they don't want to do the work?
Right.
And I think that is the hard thing as leaders. You need to kind of suss out with people on your team. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I was thinking that is an awesome way to describe the potential for change, because you're saying these are the things that we need to have in there. The rest is up to you. Like, right, you're painting done what needs to be included, and then you're offering complete autonomy for the rest of the path. Also with a, like, if it doesn't work, that's okay. We'll just try again.
Yeah,
right?
that's okay too.
Yeah.
This is nuanced. It's not cut or dry. You can't do this on everything. And there are times, even personally, where I can recognize, all right, are you avoiding this because you're trying to be a perfectionist? Are you saying no to this because it's a lot of hard work? What's going on?
Yeah.
And I was doing a talk over the summer, creating a talk, and I was really dragging my feet on putting together this talk. I was going to get on stage in front of 400 people, and I was way far behind. And what I realized in that moment, I had changed it a bunch of times. And what I realized in that moment was I was giving a talk on in-store experiences in the Cabana, which is, we have our own experiential store.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I've actually ever talked about that in public. Usually when I do talks, it's about entrepreneurship, it's about culture, it's about marketing and sales. It's that umbrella. And my procrastination there and my changing stuff around wasn't because it was going to be a better user experience. It was because I felt insecure about talking about something I'm not necessarily an authority on. And that's a good thing, right? So as soon as I recognized that, I could push through it. But sure, there were times where I'm like, well, you can just change the topic of this talk if you want to.
Right.
And so, right, that is the work that we all have to do, is understanding why are you changing it if you're changing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also heard you say, no part of me is going to allow me to walk up on stage with nothing prepared. So
definitely. No part of me.
That's right. So some of our departments, like events especially, have checkpoints built in to decide whether they should pull the ripcord or not. How do you think about approaching projects where it's like, do we have a built-in decision matrix for how this will unfold, or do we just let it go and see how it goes?
Yeah. So for our listeners out there, we're really good at planning ahead of time, right? I think now to launch a product, it's like a 64-week calendar where we start conceptualizing it 64 weeks, and not months, weeks, 64-week calendar. And it's amazing, although things always change, right? Even the best plans, what is it? The best plans, there's a laid waste.
Laid plans.
Go to waste, doesn't matter.
Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And so you have to be able to change, but really the understanding is, when is it worth stressing the team out over it, and when is it not? So events is one thing that we have. It's a ripcord policy, and basically, depending on the size of the event, there's a handful of milestones, and it needs to be pitched this far in advance. And if we don't have our X locked down by 8 weeks out, we pull the ripcord. And so we have a handful of milestones where we will just kill a project because we got behind or doesn't make sense anymore. And that's really, really important. Events are easy because there's a hard date.
Yeah.
A product launch, as long as it's not tied to like Valentine's Day, you can push it, right? You can be like, hey, we were going to launch this in July. Now we need to push it to September. So that thing you can push. But something like actually us showing up to an event, we have what's called we have a ripcord policy. And at certain times, we will just kill the event because we fucked around.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important too. I know that the events has a hardcore policy. There's a number of other things like that. I mean, for TWC, every week you have to have your slides in by, I think, noon on Monday.
Yeah.
So you have to have everything in on noon on Monday. So if you don't, and this will happen every once in a while, you go on stage and you realize your shit's not there. And it takes about one time of you doing that. And that's a hard policy because there's a whole team that's putting together our weekly staff meeting. And it's not fair to them to like let other people walk on their time because they didn't plan ahead.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of these. There's probably other ones like is anything you can think of?
Well, I was just thinking like stuff that's built into processes is mostly around like things like you said, like products or events, but the rest of it is internal. So we're not really going to cancel something. We might just say, okay, how does this shift whatever else is going on?
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's a lot of rollover, right? So we onboard in classes. So we'll have 5 dates a year that people are starting at goodr. And there's a whole process where you have to pitch a role and it gets posted and there's interview. But there are points in there where we have to pull the ripcord and it doesn't necessarily get canceled. It just gets moved to the next hiring date.
Right.
But it's a very similar thing because at a certain point, there's too much stress involved or we just don't have the right candidates.
Yeah,
exactly. Right? So this is being agile. This is, we're agile with our hiring. Every time we onboard, we do onboarding reviews, right? With the people who just came in. Were you just in the most recent one?
Yep. Sure was.
What's something that came out of there that we're going to change? Like this just happened.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always, it's great to get the feedback. There's always something where it's like, oh, we love connection calls or whatever. And then someone will say like, connection calls are great, but I'm not sure there's enough time or communicated how many people work here and how long that's going to take to do. And it's like, all right, well, we feel a message of repeating that, but we can double down one more time on that. There was one really good one that's escaping me now. But yeah, like every time someone new comes in, they have a fresh perspective. And so to capture that perspective while it's still fresh and like, hey, you just completed this 3 months of onboarding. What was that experience like? That is like another version of our kind of OWLs, right?
100%.
Like, what's a win? What would you change? And then we always ask, do you still want to work for goodr?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we got yeses across the board so far, but.
Right, but this is, I think hiring and onboarding is a really good example of you can rapidly change stuff if you're actively seeking the feedback and you do it enough times. Also, every quarter we do a launch review. And so I don't know if you've ever been on one of those, but there's basically a scorecard for every single product launch. We do 100 launches a year with 200 products attached to it. And every quarter we look at all the launches and we have metrics. All right, how did it perform social? How did it perform with ads? How did it perform on goodr.com? How well did it perform with our retailers? We have goals and metrics that we set. Did the final product look like the design? And we talk about it, and it's basically another version of OWLs, but for product. And so we're constantly looking at that and we're tweaking. We're just getting better and better. And it's never a seismic shift. It'll be like, oh yeah, we didn't take that into consideration. Oh, you know what? We bought too many of those. If we would have bought a little bit less, we would have actually said this launch as a success. So So there is a bunch of things like that come in here, and it's really easy to just put your head down and like be a lemming and live in Groundhog Day, but it's way more fun to constantly be changing things.
Yeah, totally. So I'm guessing those insights end up as the insight checklist for another product that's similar, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Right, where this one just springs to mind. We launched a product and it did well compared to other things like it. We just bought too many. We just overestimated how many we thought we were going to sell. And so planning's in that room. And so they're taking notes and they're saying like, all right, cool. So next time we do something like this in this time of year, we are going to adjust our purchasing. And then we're like, cool, problem solved. Let's move on. We don't need to dwell about this.
Yeah, right on. Oh, that's great. I think you said it well. Like it's just a mindset of wanting to improve the user experience with the least amount of stress possible, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah, it is. How do we? Well, there's a bunch here, but it is user experience is key, and I think understanding that who is your client. So when we're hiring, it is everybody that we're interviewing. Like that is the client. Like those people aren't even on our staff yet. Yeah. Onboarding, it's every new hire. That's the client. For a photo shoot, well, it's the customers. All right, did the photo shoot match what we wanted it to? And so on and so forth. And so this is just all OWLs, agility. It's like, how do we just get the end product better and better and better? And the other thing that I think people should really get hyped about, it just makes your job more fun because you are constantly tweaking it. You're never, and that's a really fun place to live.
Yeah, definitely. Along those lines, I've heard you say in different contexts, basically like read the room, right? Do you double down or do you cancel something? So if you're giving a talk or it's like, 4 p.m. on a Thursday during PDA, like you've got choices. So talk through some of those scenarios for us.
Yeah. I speak in front of people a lot, speak in front of the company a lot. And we do a quarterly meeting called PDA. And this last PDA, it's 3-day. It's all day Tuesday, all day Thursday, half day Friday. And everybody's just exhausted. They were exhausted at the company. And instead of us doing our normal agenda on Friday, I was like, hey, here's what we're going to do instead. We are going to completely trash it and do it this way. And that was really, really important because I'm looking out in everybody's eye and thinking, we're not going to get productive work done.
Right.
Why would we throw good money after bad? Why would we waste everybody's time? We're better off canceling the day and letting people sleep. And that's a really, really important thing. Also, if you ever are doing a talk and you look at a room and people are falling asleep, that's on you. You gotta pull the ripcord on that. You gotta do something drastic to get their attention back.
Like, I am not going to read the rest of these bullet points. Let's just get to the fun part.
Exactly. So reading the room is really, really important in all contexts.
Yeah, for sure. I remember that particular Friday, I was like, all right, I can hold it down. I can hold this together. And you were like, hey, we're just going to scrap this. This is what we're going to do instead. Everybody's going to go home in an hour. And everyone was just like,
yeah,
I can make it an hour. It's great. Worked out great.
Because I think sometimes people just grind to grind. I mean, hey, we know when it's time to grind.
Yeah.
Usually that's not a surprise. And so when you're exhausted and it's not, you give yourself a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's the double down or cancel.
Yeah.
You find yourself at that crossroads. You've got to be able to make the decision. And that is where the gut instinct comes in.
Yeah.
Kind of when we were prepping for this, right? You were talking about your decision matrix for this exact thing. And you were saying what can you control with the resources you have? Mm-hmm. You've only got so many fucks to give. And then how autonomous are you in the situation, right?
Yeah.
So how do you apply that? Can you apply that to a particular situation so that just to make it clear?
Yeah. I mean, I need to be very mindful of how agile I want the company to be because everybody essentially will do what I say. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if I'm not aware, that puts an insane amount of stress on. So, some practical examples. If I'm working on a talk, it's my talk, and I'm working on it, I have numerous times worked 20, 30, 40 hours on a talk and thrown it in the trash and started over.
Yeah.
Well, that's my time. Yeah. I'm not really, I'm not putting much stress on anybody else at that moment. I may have to ask for a little more time before I get my final presentation in. Mm-hmm. But in that moment, I am wearing all of the stress in that. So that's completely okay. Then there's the other things of taking stuff away, right? So we talk about that meeting, it's way easier to be agile and say, hey, we're going to not do that, mm-hmm. right? Because that you're actually relieving stress. You're creating more slack in the line. So that agility is really, really easy to do.
Yeah.
It's really important. It's kind of a gift. But the thing everyone needs to be mindful of is when is it worth a fire drill and when is it not? Mm-hmm. So this podcast is a perfect example. We wanted to change it up. And was it 2 weeks ago? Was it, how long ago was was it about maybe 2 weeks?
Yeah.
2 weeks from this record day, it was hey, we want to change the room. We want to add things, switch things up. So it was enough time. I mean, I actually looked at it practically. I'm like, there's enough time for us to make these changes. The changes are in the realm of possibility. It wasn't, hey, we want a fully designed out custom studio with X, Y, and Z. And so if I would have had the realization and we were recording the next week, we would have either just done it the old way or I would have said, hey, can we push the recording X far down the road? Mm-hmm. And so you need to understand how much stress are you putting on and who are you putting the stress on? Can they handle it?
Right.
Because otherwise you're just an asshole. Right. I mean, otherwise that's just what's going on. And so, and I think the last point on this, I'm really good at, I'm okay killing my own ideas and killing my own, not my own real, I don't have a child, but I'm a product becomes your little baby and you want to take care of it. And it's sometimes you'll just have a hard time killing it. I don't. Yeah. And the more you kill it, the easier it becomes. And so I think, I think those are kind of the big things people need to navigate is if it's your own time, well, do what you want. Mm-hmm. If you are creating slack by your agility, that's good. You can kind of do that ad hoc and you should. And then if you need something to change and you want to be super agile, ask yourself, is there enough bandwidth to make this change effective? And if not, revisit how you approach that, because the last thing you want to do is just run in there just uninformed and you think you're making things better, but you're actually just making things worse.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you mentioned it earlier, but the idea that what worked for goodr in 2016, 2017 doesn't work in 18, 19, 20. I feel like when you say that, you're giving yourself and the rest of us permission to change.
Yeah.
Which is something that doesn't always feel obvious, but it's something that you've used consistently. Is there anything else like that, or maybe just want to talk about that, that you would advise people when it comes to staying agile? So they're kind of stuck in one way of doing things and they want to shake it up.
Man, I mean, I think a couple of things spring to mind. One, we'll talk about the context of goodr. This is a really, I think, hard thing for a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders to fully recognize, but a lot of times when the people you start a company with and help you get to, 20 people and 30 people and 40 people, a lot of times not all those people are going to be the people that are going to take you to 100 people, 150 people, or insert revenue number.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard one, because you have to, at that point, you have to either get rid of people, you have to bring people in with experience and put them over top of people. Mm-hmm. That is a really hard thing that is very, very real. We have lived through that. And so that one, obviously, you need to do with a lot more thought and tact, but it's a really important thing, and understanding that. I mean, we have killed numerous teams here at goodr, right? In the past couple of years, and people who like Puppet Masters come to mind, right? And I think we didn't get rid of the roles. We just needed to reshift the teams, because that team and department did not work in our current ecosystem.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are like the people ones are the hardest ones. And then I think the ones that as a leader you should be really understanding is, how are you evaluating and evolving your role and what you're doing? Mm-hmm. Because nobody's going to tell me to do something else. It's on me to understand, as a leader, what is my next level up? And for example, I'm really good at a lot of times of being agile, like, pulling my focus, but really I'm at a place where we got to this level because like I can put my head down and grind. Like I can grind. I know I can grind. I had 2 jobs until did not have 2 jobs until I was 35 years old.
Yeah.
And so I know that what the skill I am trying to cultivate actively is, how do I not grind? How do I not have my head down and walk forward? How do I keep my head up and look around and like live in a little more uncertainty, or a little less like hardcore progress and box checking? Mm-hmm. And so I am also having to be agile and like evolve on the fly. And that's a really important thing. I mean, the reason I verbalize it, this isn't the first time I said it, I verbalize it to people around me so that they hold me accountable for it, because that's what I need.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that requires a willingness to step into uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And that comes with fear because it's the unknown. However, that also means it contains all possibility, right? So if you're willing to let go of something that you're very familiar with and go into unfamiliar territory, you can get brand new things that you didn't know were there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And everything's a work in progress. Mm-hmm. This company, a product launch, us as people, and it's actually really good to change.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right. Well, anything you want to answer again or didn't get to bring up?
Give us an example of 2 things you've been had to be super agile on this year.
Well, culture mastery, we shifted that completely from one thing to another between April and then I think June. And then from June, it was 100% different than we've ever done it before.
Yeah.
And then AMP. So our quarterly review system, in the first month of this year, it went from being AMP week, which we'd had for all time prior, to being AMP month. Yeah. It like bled over to a month. And I think it even made it into 2 months, which is like, man, if you're doing a quarterly review and it takes a month and a half, that's not good.
Yeah.
Right? So we got to change that. So we were like, all right, what can we do to make this agile and scalable? We're drawing from the insights of, a month is not a week. So that's not good. Yeah. Right. So we looked at all that and shifted it up, and we ended up coming up with this idea of AMP quarterbacks. We just need someone to run that meeting, and we can train those people, and that will infinitely scale up. Right. So it was one of those things where it's like, it's not obvious that it doesn't work until it fully breaks.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, well, put the pieces out here. Well, we're still going to do reviews. That's going to happen. We still need these people in the reviews. But do we need these ones in? No, we don't. Those are interchangeable. Boom, fix that. And then it all worked.
Yeah, right. So two things I think that are worth noting on that. One is we switched from, we used to always do AMP week, and we switched to like, well, let's just pull it out over a month so it gives more time. And we were agile, right? We switched that, it didn't work, and we came back.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing is we also give ourselves permission to go back to things. I think that's right. I think that is actually, think about that. A lot of times people, they're kind of like, well, we change it. It's like, yeah, well, we changed it and it didn't work. Let's just change it back.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. I think that's actually something we didn't talk about at all today, but that is really important. If you're like, we're just going to try something new, and what's the worst? We go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's an okay thing too. Sometimes we're really good at verbalizing it beforehand. And sometimes I think people think that, you think you're a failure because you're like, well, now I got to change it back. It's like, or you just have a lot of courage and you tried something different and it didn't work.
Yeah, for sure. Another one that comes to mind is peer reviews. And when we thought of it, we're like, that's great. It's going to work out fine.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of research, like did all these things like, yeah, this, that, and the other thing, super light questions, just easy, star answers, no problem. And then everyone was like, what is this? Who's going to read it? Is this going on my permanent record? I don't even know how to answer this. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We might try it again later, but not next time.
Yeah, 100%. And then the last point, when you talked about the whole culture mastery, that was a thing that we recognized we needed to change, but we gave ourselves the space there, right?
Yeah.
We're like, hey, I think we had a working session maybe in March, identified it, came back in April, put it into effect in July.
Yeah.
And so agile does not mean you change today.
Right.
I mean, changing our culture mastery, doing it in a 4 or 5 month period is insanely fast.
Yeah.
But that it was appropriately fast and gave us enough time. And so I think for the listeners out there, just understanding that agile does not mean today. Sometimes agile means a day, a week, a month, a year. And that's okay. What is the size of the project? And understand what is agile comparatively to the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, right. And what's the opportunity cost if you keep it the way it is or pause it for a little while and change it later? Like that, just looking at the investment of time and money and go, all right, well, is it okay to change it? I think it is.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we're good here.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Steven. Thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, be excellent to each other.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Gooder podcast. To submit questions for the podcast, learn more about our culture, and learn how you can status the quote challenge, head over to goodr.com/culture. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, including on YouTube, where you can now watch all of our new episodes. Who knows? You might even catch a glimpse of Carl at our headquarters if he's not already passed out at the tiki bar from all the margaritas.